All right, welcome to the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster from Contact Renovations and Custom Homes. This week, we're talking about HVAC and air conditioning. And my friend and colleague, Keven Lackey from Acclaimed Heating, Cooling, and Furnace Cleaning is on the show today. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what you need to consider about HVAC, different type of landmines to avoid when planning renovations that impact your HVAC layout, and things to know about your furnace, air conditioning systems, all that stuff. So, so we'll get into that in a sec here. I'm going to introduce Keven, and then I'll bring him onto the show, and we'll get right into the action here. So, Keven is from Acclaimed Heating, Cooling, and Furnace Cleaning. He's the owner and general manager. It's locally owned, family-run business. They install, service, and clean furnaces, air conditioners, humidifiers, and hot water tanks. They've been in business for 25 years, and they have 3 generations of their family working within the business, which is something that Keven's very proud of, and no doubt he should be. It's a great team over there. We worked with several different HVAC contractors over the years, and by far Keven and his team, they stand out to me as people who really care about what they're doing and looking out for their clients' best interests. So definitely somebody I recommend, and I value his judgment. And there you go. So I'll bring him onto the show. Keven, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul.
I'm just going to change our view here. So, I guess at a glance, HVAC and air conditioning doesn't sound exciting. It's not one of those high-profile things that are part of your renovation that people put a lot of thought into. And too often we see that in the results of the renovation or maybe the new home build, where there wasn't enough thought put into it, whether it be the layout, the configuration of the ducting, the location of the mechanical room within the basement, causing for some really challenging spaces to finish off. And sometimes they have undersized equipment or just things that simply don't work properly or don't pass an inspection. Right? Where you have
100%
exhaust too close to a window, or your exhaust tucked up tight against your intake, and things like that maybe the average homeowner doesn't know. And certainly based on my experience, I've seen there's a lot of contractors that don't know that either. Right? So we clean up a lot of messes out there, and you help us do that. So that's great. So, so I guess, I got a bunch of topics here we can talk about today. And we'll start off with, I think what I'd like to talk about at first is air quality, because I think in the end, now that spring is here and we have a chance to get outside a bit, leave our windows open, and that's a nice breath of fresh air after being kind of cooped up in the house all winter. We've had you guys come in and do a lot of our duct cleaning work for us too, and we sure find some surprises in there. But let's talk about air quality and how we can get the best results within your overall system, right? Whether that be your filtration options, whether that be how it's set up. And so I'll let you get into explaining that a bit for us.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I like the way you put that in terms of us not being in the sexiest business at all. And it's kind of like your 2x4 studs and your foundation that once it's done, you can't really see it anymore. But without those, all the pretty things don't work well. And in terms of the air quality, one of the really important things to do when you're putting that new furnace in, whether it's new construction or your retrofit, is putting a good quality filtration system in. And you don't have to break the bank to do that at all. Mm-hmm. And we like to use the biggest filter that we can that's still economical, and get that air flowing through that furnace really efficiently. So a lot of times what that means is putting a base under the furnace so that you've got the air coming into that furnace in a much larger opening than if you just do the one side of the furnace, which is common. So, one of the pitfalls we see frequently is that you have these filters, people go and buy as efficient a 1-inch filter is, and they've got this huge furnace and the furnace just can't properly pull through that. So a really good air filtration system is a really important place to start, no matter what else comes after. And this time of year, I feel like our house has been painted yellow with all of the pollen. It's really amazing.
Right.
And if that's something that bothers you, you can definitely take care of that by keeping your windows closed and having an air conditioner going. And that way, none of those allergens can come in. So if you do have bad allergies and such, that's a really good way of handling that part of it. Humidity is very important in terms of having clean humidity, getting all the dust and debris out of the ductwork so it's clean. So there's a lot of these things, none of them really, really complicated, but a lot of them just are not thought about until people have, problems.
Yeah, no kidding. Back to the filtration systems for a second. So in my home, I have a 1987 built home. I have 2 furnaces and we're in a bi-level. So we have 1 furnace for each level, which on one hand is great. If one never goes down, we can still heat our house. But I have within mine, we have those electrostatic air filters.
Right.
What are your thoughts on those units? And do you still see them in new furnaces now? And do you ever service them, or you just basically, remove them from the picture?
We kind of remove those from the picture most of the time. So, in a smaller furnace, the smaller the furnace, the less air that it has to move. And so long as you're not moving huge volumes of air, you can kind of get away with a smaller filter. An electrostatic filter, the 1-inch wide ones, they used to be very popular. There's nothing wrong with using those so long as the size is large enough for your furnace. But if you have a large furnace, those tend to restrict the airflow a little bit more. And the big thing is that you have to clean them regularly and clean them properly. Right. So as with many things in life, proper maintenance allows you to use things that you might not be able to use if they're not maintained properly. And those need to have some work to kind of maintain. We find that's not always done. You're meticulous about it, I'm sure, in your own home. So
yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I know that I'm not. I keep telling myself for 8 months now, I got to bring filters home. I got to bring filters home.
It's funny. We buy new filter packs for every project that we start. So we're constantly changing the furnace filters while we do renovations in their home.
Right.
And it's amazing how often I forget to change my own filters in my house. Like, it's one of those things that's on our punch list for site setup. Make sure they're brought to site and they're changed regularly throughout the project. And then I'll look at mine all of a sudden one day. I'm like, holy smokes, it's been 6 months. Well, I have 2 dogs at home, so you can imagine, and 2 long-haired boys, and a long-haired wife. So in the end, it's the filter can be definitely plugged up. So I guess on that note, what do you think is a good schedule for someone to be looking at maintaining and cleaning or replacing their filters?
Well, you say 3 generations in our family. So our one of our newest ones is my son Cameron, who's been with us almost 2 years now. He's on the duct cleaning side of things, and he said the other day, he said, I try to explain it like this, and I thought it was brilliant. He said, your filter is like a haircut. Your filter's like a haircut, but you don't notice it getting longer until you look at your hair one day and think, oh my God, I need a haircut. And so, just looking at that filter every month, every 2 months, until you get to know your house, until you get to know what is going on with that filter, and then try to plan it like that. But I thought it was a really great way of putting it, just like a haircut. You don't notice it often until it's too late, and you don't want it to go too late. Better to do it sooner than later. Yeah.
Well, at least the filter doesn't dissolve like my hair seems to be. So that's a good thing, at least. So,
yeah.
What about like furnace and duct cleaning? What kind of a schedule do you recommend people stick to for that program? And how important is that?
It's a really important thing to do. So after a renovation, for example, which is what you guys do for people, it's really important because no matter the site prep and everything else, you're going to get a lot of dust and debris in that system. So it's very important to do after a big project like that. I would say it really honestly is kind of like a haircut. Some people need that haircut more often because they've got allergies, they've got asthma, they've got a very, very busy home. So in your home, you've got growing kids, you've got a wife, you've got these 2 dogs. We're going to be able to get stuff out of that system every year and benefit you. And it depends on your filtration, but also how important it is to you. You could have a high dust load, but maybe nobody in the house has allergies or asthma, but a lot of people do. So, some people once a year is really beneficial. I would say you shouldn't let it go for more than about 3 years. So between 1 and 3, dependent on the environment and what your needs are.
Absolutely. And I guess it depends on how many new houses are popping up around your house too. Right. That's something to consider. Like if you live in an area where you've got a lot of infill, or you're in a new neighborhood that's developing and there's construction all around your home, like you should be on top of, maintaining and cleaning, replacing your furnace filter more often, and probably get onto your duct cleaning. And you'll know you have to clean your windows more often. Like 100%. Everything's going to be layered in dust, which is certainly the downside of living in a hot market in the infill area, or whether you live in a new subdivision or development zone.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
I'm trying to pull up some pictures of some of those treasures you guys found in your duct cleanings, and for some reason they aren't in the folder. I don't know what happened here, but Yeah, there's some pretty shocking stuff. Let me tell you. I'm sorry.
There is.
I'll post some pictures in our social media feed later to show you some of the stuff these guys find. It's hilarious.
Well, it
Yeah.
is, and I don't know what pictures actually Mallory sent you, but Mallory, who's our manager on the cleaning side, she has a collection. So she actually has all these jars with a collection of things, and they honestly, they don't look real. They're kind of like, come on, you don't find that in ducts, but we find just almost everything in ducts, and she's got a lovely collection of jars. So
Yeah. Well, here you go. Here's a little toy truck you guys found in there. It's a beauty.
Beauty. Yeah. Kids' toys, popular item.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyhow, I'll get that off of there. So what else can we get into here?
Well, just
makeup air systems.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Just one more thing with the air quality part of things. UV lights, so ultraviolet lights and other things that kind of sterilize the air. A lot of times people call them like a filter, like a UV filter. They're not a filter. They're basically like an air treatment device. And UV lights, for example, will kill viruses. So coronavirus and these types of things, they will kill that. And it's really something as well that really enhances the air quality for a house. So if you have respiratory issues or you're trying to get the best air quality in your home, it doesn't take the dust particles out, but what it does do is it destroys all of the biological contaminants and things of that nature. And for people that do have allergies, and particularly respiratory illness, something that's more serious, that has a profound effect as well on the air quality in their home. So that is another one of those things that really, really will make a difference for people that have serious issues.
Absolutely. I remember we did a project for a lady years ago, and she had some severe allergies where she couldn't really even leave her house. And she had these 3 HEPA filters set up in conjunction with her entire furnace system.
Right.
And it was really remarkable to see what she had to tolerate as far as like the smallest little bit of how that could impact her allergy and flare it up. So it was really, really like it was a tough project to renovate within her home because we had to be very careful, obviously, of the dust we generate within the home during the project and be very aware of the materials we brought in the home. Like built some cabinets for her, and we had to make sure that there was no formaldehyde in the MDF, for example. That's something that MDF does contain, right? And it's one of those things that if you have an allergy, you have to be aware of it. So I bring it up only because when you get into the filtration side of things, of course, you can go to the extreme end if you do have a condition that requires it. And, the UV lights, how often are you putting those systems in with the UV?
We put those in quite a lot. You have to spend a pretty good chunk of change to get something that actually works. It is one of those technologies where if you're not spending, $900 in that range, you're really probably not getting a system that works except for like a placebo effect. So we're putting those systems on a regular basis. The bulbs on those last a long time on those good units. So we're putting a good number, and certainly we've seen an uptake since our whole environment and indoor air quality has kind of become a little bit more focused. So for sure, that's something that hasn't increased.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
And I guess then as we tie into this, and like we can go off in some different directions here, but we'll talk briefly about makeup air systems and HRVs and what the difference is and what they do within the air quality of your home.
Right.
So maybe you can elaborate on that for us.
I'd love to. So, HRVs, that's something that's kind of become fairly standard and kind of code in terms of the new construction market for a while now. And so the way that an HRV works, they're confusing as all get out, I find, to kind of explain it to people, and even our own people. It's kind of like, once they get it, they're kind of like, why was that so complicated? But the concept is a bit tricky. So an HRV is typically hanging from the ceiling in a new house. A lot of times we're retrofitting these now, but typically they're hung. And there's 2 vents that go outdoors. One of the vents that goes outdoors is to suck air into your home mechanically with a fan. The other one is an exhaust pumping air out of your house. Now, what happens on the inside of your house is that you've got some air going inside of your house, and you've got an air vent inside of your house that is blowing out through that exhaust. And what happens is you basically have this like cross core, and the heat that is leaving your house will preheat the air coming in the house because there's a heat transfer taking place. So you're preheating that air, which makes it a lot more efficient, but you're exchanging the air in the house. So you're taking air out that might be stale and kind of rotten, maybe too humid. and you're sending fresh air inside of the house to replenish that. So in a nutshell, that's how that system works. And a lot of new houses, they have their bathroom vents hooked up to an HRV as well. So, the bathroom vent now is not something that's blowing outside all the time. It's actually hooked up to that HRV system, which makes it more efficient to kind of get that air out from the bathroom.
Then it's always drawing air, right? As opposed to only when you flick the switch.
Right, exactly. So you can make them go different ways. A lot of people have them run 24/7. Depends on what your needs are. I'm a big fan, depending on the environment, of just having them running 24/7 because, again, you're preheating that air, and depending on what's going on in your house, it's great. You can set them to run 10 minutes out of every hour, or you can just control them with these switches so that you need it when it's in the bathroom. So that's an HRV. We're installing a lot of those now in retrofit applications as well. A little bit different, but they're doing the same thing. Now, you mentioned makeup air units. I'm glad you mentioned that. We've done projects together where it's very common now. I'd say it's almost commonplace, and it's rare the other way, but people are putting range hoods in that suck a lot of air out, right? So range hoods these days, it's not uncommon. What would the norm be, Paul? Probably like 500 CFM would be pretty common these days.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it really depends. We find it really ranges from, on the lower end, you get one that's around 300 CFM, and we'll get them up to 900, 1,000 CFM. And it depends on what kind of range they have. Is it gas? Is it electric? But a lot of people just want the look of the big range hood. They don't really understand the importance of how it functions. And like, it never used to be code that you had to vent to the exterior. You could have a recirculating fan with the little charcoal filter in there, and that was fine. But now that's not fine. Now you need to pull that air out. I'm just going to share an image here. Bear with me for a sec here.
Those charcoal filters are interesting because they used to be allowed, but they've never been good. The getting air out of your house is really a very important thing to do. And the big thing that's not considered a lot of the time is that the air that you're forcing out of your house, just think about how that air is getting back into your house. Because if it's not coming back into your house in a way that's appropriate, your house will be totally starved for air, which is absolutely a terrible situation to have for a lot of reasons. And so the makeup air part of things, makeup air is what you need and introduce when you've got an exhaust air, just like that range hood you have there. And those are things that we put preheaters in because you need to preheat that air. But it's a really critical part of a lot of homes that are being renovated where they have nice range hoods. And it's a very important part.
Absolutely. And so I'd say that, you have to consider that too. So if you put a beast of a range hood in like this one, and just because the hood itself is large doesn't mean the fan is, but most likely it's going to come with a heck of a high H or CFM fan as well, right? So if that thing's pulling out 1,000 CFM, you think about, well, where's that going to pull the air from? And one of our concerns is that what if it's pulling that from a dirty source? So we could be pulling air in from an unfinished basement. We could be pulling air from, if you have atmospheric venting, hot water heater, and furnace, if you get enough of a draft pulling into the kitchen out your range hood, you can start pulling exhaust fumes into the home as well. So that's where you get into a bit of that's why code has changed, right? So often now we need to interlock our range hood to our furnace so that when the fan turns on for your range hood, it kicks on the furnace to help draw more air into the home, right? So that's one way around the makeup air unit. Is sometimes you can interlock them. In some cases, when depends how new and how airtight your home is. Some of these new houses are so airtight that if you draw 1,000 CFM out, interlocking your furnace isn't going to be sufficient, right? That's where you get into adding the makeup air unit.
Well, what's interesting is the interlocking part of it. It's a code thing. For me personally, it's probably the least important part of that makeup air equation. And the reason for that is that you can have no booster fan on. You don't have to have your furnace on. But when you feel how much air comes in through a makeup air vent, when you flick the switch for that range hood fan, it comes in like immediately. It is fast, and you don't even need anything else going on there because it's a big enough air vent, and what goes out comes back in. The other areas where that air often comes from is through wood burning fireplaces. So I've been in lots of houses that have wood burning fireplaces in it. Why is my house smoky? I don't understand. I don't even use it, but it smells like fireplace. And inevitably it's because they've got negative air, and it's easy to bring it down that fireplace. And gas fireplaces as well. Gas fireplace has that type of capability as well. So very important.
Absolutely. So just showing some images of your range hood. And
Yeah.
like I said before, often people, when they're in their kitchen design stage and they're picking their appliance group, some of them want these very prominent range hoods that stand out as kind of a focal point. And that's great. But I always send them out, look, if you're working within the limitations of a budget on your project, it's not just the cost of that range hood itself, is what rough-in changes do we need to make to accommodate that? So often you'll have the size of the vent pipe.
Yeah.
You'll see standard roughed-in in older homes at a 4-inch duct size on your range hood vent.
Right.
Now you're going to be up at a minimum 5 inches, most likely 6 to 8. Sometimes you get into these really large duct sizes. So then we have to then run new venting outside too. So there's other considerations aside from just, I guess tying in the interlock or the makeup air unit is also the cost of venting these things properly. And we have some clients say, we just want the look of it. I'll never use it on high. I'll use it on low. So we'll be, 200 CFM, just leave the old ducting size the same. And I mean, I can't do that, right? Obviously at that point we reach an impasse, because that's just because you're not going to use it. Maybe the next homeowner will, and they start cranking that thing up to try and exhaust 1,000 CFM out of there. And it's trying to push it through a 4-inch duct. We're going to have a problem, and that fan's going to, it'll die quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyhow, so one more we can talk about briefly here while we're talking about range hoods is this one. You don't see a range hood, and that's because this is a downdraft unit. So what that means is you're now have a fan that's sucking air downwards, and you're running your ducting down through your cabinet, out to your floor, to the exterior. So this is a different look. If you don't want to see the big range hood in your kitchen, you like that open concept, it's a lot cleaner looking. But in my humble opinion, these don't work as well as the range hood itself because, well, heat rises, right? So it's pretty tough to get your, you have a big pot, you're boiling and all that steam and vapors coming out the top, and you now have a fan built in at countertop height trying to pull that down and out. That's a pretty big ask of it. So they do work, just not as well. So it's, food for thought there.
So fun fact with that, Paul. So if you're over the age of 50, you might know what this is. Do you know what, like the Kleenex tissue paper, the brand is Kleenex. Everybody calls tissue paper Kleenex. Do you know what the layman's term is for older folks with that type of venting?
With downdraft? No, I don't have a clue.
People call it Gen Air. So Gen Air used to be like a brand of high-end kind of appliances and whatnot.
And it's still around,
It's kind of funny because that was like the Kleenex of the day. It's like, hey, I've got a Gen Air. It's like, what's a Gen Air? Oh, don't it's those downdraft things. Right.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes that brand will become synonymous with the actual product.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. What should we get into next here? We've got furnaces, air conditioning. You pick a topic, Kevin, and we'll fly with it.
Well, it's air conditioning season. So, let's talk about air conditioners right now. And one of there's very important things I think that a lot of homeowners can do that's really basic. And even if it's just inspecting it and taking a look at it, not even necessarily doing anything with it. But one of the basic things with air conditioners is there's the outside part of it, which people typically think of, well, there's my air conditioner. It's a really important part of the system. And outside, it's important that doesn't get dirty. So when it gets fuzz on it, this time of year, a lot of people have poplar fuzz around their house. So if poplar fuzz is out there and you're using your air conditioner, it just turns white. Yeah. So those can be cleaned a lot of times with a vacuum or a hose. And that's a really important thing to do. So that's just a visual thing. And you don't even have to clean it. Just check it and make sure it's okay. Call us or whatnot if you're not going to do it on your own. That picture that you just had up there, that one is basically kind of placed in the dirt. I don't know if you're able to go back to that one, Paul.
Sure. Give me a sec here.
But and that's one thing to look at as well is that air conditioners are really designed to be in the elements. They're designed to be outside, but it's important where you install those. So that one there's a good example of one that probably when it was installed, it may have been above the dirt. Maybe somebody put more dirt there, but you want to make sure it's raised. So on a raised base or on brackets are even better. So and then there's the level of it. So if it's not done very well, then you've got to do that level. So this is an example of one you've brought up there, which is on brackets. That's on a house. In new areas, that's really the norm because you've got such a slant and people install those a lot of time before landscaping. So you put those brackets on a wall. This one here is what we call a ductless split unit. So a bit different than what we usually see on homes. But this type of a system, that ductless split, is for condominiums and also houses that have boiler systems. They don't have any furnace and ventilation running through the house. So those ones are becoming more common in condominiums. And also as they become more known, people that have thought, I can't have air conditioning, we're putting those into to a number of homes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find some pictures here that work to show the different options for the platforms. Give me a second here. This it's our first show using this platform here now, so I'm just still figuring out some of these shortcuts here, which it's taking a long time. Anyhow, there's one on a nice concrete base.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of bases out there. We like to use plastic. There's also other bases. A common question is, should I have concrete base and such? And it's rare to have a concrete base. You don't need a concrete base so long as it's raised. This is a good example of kind of what you see in new home construction, where the type of brackets are holding up off of the grass. The landscaping can be done after. I really like those too, because I just can't imagine you're ever going to have kind of dirt and foliage and whatnot getting close enough when it's raised up like that. So it's just going to increase the performance and so forth of that unit over a period of time. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny when we come into houses for projects and we look at the air conditioning unit. It's just caked, covered.
Right.
And I saw one the other day at a client's house, and I was like, that thing still work? And he's like, yeah, it works just fine. I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, if you actually just clean that thing off, it probably would work way better, and you'd probably see a better lifespan out of that unit too. But
oh, totally. It definitely affects the efficiency like a lot. And it's kind of like a furnace filter. So as your furnace filter gets dirtier, or if it's restricting the airflow that blower is trying to pull through it, it just has to work that much harder and take that much more electricity to get it to work.
Absolutely. So I guess let's talk a bit about then pricing behind an air conditioning unit for somebody who does not have air conditioning in their home right now. What would be an average range to expect, not just for the units themselves, and I'm sure they vary based on size and quality of manufacturer, but on the installation side too, and some of those behind the scenes costs on the rough side of it.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot going on with an air conditioning installation. So there's that unit outside. Like I say, if you say, hey, do you have an air conditioner? People kind of think of that unit outside. So that unit outside is connected to another coil, an air conditioning coil that sits on top of the furnace. And those are connected now with two copper lines. There's electrical going outside. There's a lot involved, in the whole scope of an air conditioner. So no matter what size of a house you have, if you're looking at a basic installation where there's nothing crazy going on, between $4,000 and $6,000 should get you an air conditioner installed. That's a really good quality unit, but certainly not top of the line. And, like everything in life, you can get, higher efficiency models. You can get units that are quieter, which cost a premium to do that. And, you're looking at going as much as double your investment to get the highest quality, highest efficiency, quietest unit over top of just a good quality, more basic unit.
And then as far as like installation goes, are there electrical considerations or, other rough-in costs that come with it? Or is it typically something that would be, most houses are equipped to take an air conditioning unit as it stands?
Right. Most houses are equipped to take it. So if you only have like a 60 amp service coming in because you've got a really, really old house that doesn't have a normal electricity coming into it, you probably have to upgrade your service to do that. Other times you can easily expand on that panel. So if you've got a proper panel and it's full, lots of different things you can do there. A lot of times if we're going into a house and the panel's full, they're almost thankful because they're thinking, I've meant to kind of put this in or that in over the years, and okay, air conditioning is going to finally force the subject to get more circuits in there. So if you need to upgrade that, it's beneficial to homeowners in other ways also. And it's really about where those things are installed in relationship to things. So if you take a house and the electrical panel is on one side of the house and the furnace room is on the other side of the house, the condenser is going the other side of the house, you have to get that wire from that panel to that location over there. And you have to run things between the furnace location and the condenser. So a finished ceiling, things of that nature, that's where some extra rough-in comes into play for sure.
Yeah, we see that often too when you have to pull a circuit. You need a single circuit for whatever you might need. You want to heat your bathroom floor. We need to pull a dedicated circuit over across a finished basement. Of course, it's the polar opposite end of the home. Now we're talking drywall demolition. We got to have the electrician, or the sparky, as I like to call them, fish the wire across. And then we have the cost of the repairs to the drywall and the paint too, right? So those are some costs to consider. You get somebody come out and quotes you a system installed, make sure it includes everything that you need to know about the price, because you might sign off on the air conditioning unit and install and then not realize there's a whole other bill coming from your electrical contractor, from your general contractor with drywall removal and repairs and all that stuff. So just be aware and ask those questions. I mean, a good contractor will point these out to you, of course, but not all contractors are cut from the same cloth.
No, it's a good example of why we have to go into a house to take a look at it and do a site assessment and to get to know what that homeowner's needs are so we can recommend the right product. There's lots of little clever things too, where an electrician, their first idea is probably not putting some crown molding, for example, on the ceiling. We've done quite a few installations where you run that wire there. It's kind of like the electrical panel. It's like, oh, crown molding will look wonderful in my basement.
That's right.
Super. We can hide it during that. And, electricians, as well as I do, some of them are magicians when it comes to running things like that. But there's all sorts of little things to do. And that's where somebody like yourself, an experienced HVAC contractor, can really pay off, is having some of these ideas on how to make it happen and not have to completely redo your basement.
Yep, true enough. I'm going to question in here from Alicia. What should I be looking for if I have an open concept and high ceilings and want to install air conditioning?
Super question. It depends on your layout of the house, just like that with a high ceiling. It also depends a lot on your ventilation system that's there. So installing a larger air conditioner would typically be something to recommend if you have that kind of volume in your house and those high ceilings. But an air conditioner can be only sized appropriately dependent on the furnace that you have there to push the air through, and also the size of the ductwork and ventilation. So we have a ratio that we use, which is really, really rough, and it's 600 to 700 square feet per ton of air conditioner. A tonnage is how they measure that. So there's circumstances where we'd actually go over that and under that. And south-facing windows in a walkout basement and a high ceiling like that are always considerations. But it's very important to consider that the furnace itself is a huge part of that. The fan of your furnace is responsible for blowing that conditioned air. And then your ductwork, if it's too small, it doesn't matter on the furnace either. So those are considerations to make as well. But generally speaking, you'll want to increase the size of that air conditioner more so than if you didn't have those high ceilings and consider all of those factors. And we've been in many projects together, Paul, where it's like, well, you know what, adding an extra air vent here is easy to do. And that's another thing as well. So particularly if it's a main floor and the basement is open in those areas, running another vent or two right off of that furnace will get more air into those areas as well. So those are typically things to look at.
Especially in an older home, or a home that was built in 2007, perhaps. Here, there was a bit of a boom here in 2007. So a lot of the homes that we find that were built in that era or that specific window of the boom, a lot of corners were cut, right? So when we go in now to do renovations, we'll take a look at it. We'll assess what was actually installed. How is it roughed in? Do we have it set up to optimize the performance of the home and the systems that are there? So often we'll suggest adding heat runs or cold air returns, just to make sure that it all works well and the system balances well. And people complain often of cold spots in the home or hot spots perhaps, and it's a matter of looking at, well, how was it ever laid out to start with? So
that's a tough one, right? Because you got 2-story houses, which are almost the norm these days, and there's only one thermostat. And it's almost impossible to balance a 2-story house with all the bedrooms with that one thermostat location. You do it the best you can. But again, that's the limitations of the duct design that you're dealing with. And trying to tweak that can sometimes be effective.
Absolutely. I'm going to show you some photos here, because while we're on this topic, I got a couple good ones to show you. And bear with me as I click my way through this little maze. All right. Speaking of duct design, This isn't really ducting, I guess it is, but looks like an octopus. But what I'm getting at is, oh, that's the wrong one. You see all different types of work, quality of work, planning behind the projects. These are some fine examples of poorly planned work done by, who knows? I'm going to hope it's a homeowner who didn't know any better, right? I'm sure hoping that someone didn't pay a contractor a fair market rate to have an install like this completed, right? So
Hopefully
planning the way that your ducting is laid out is critical. I'm looking for one picture in particular here, and I might not be able to just, I won't be able to. Give me a second. I'll go look for it for a sec. But we did a job together a couple of years ago for a client. We did a basement development. And the way the ducting was run, it created a very low head clearance through the basement.
Right.
We also had a bearing wall that we decided to remove and put in a beam. So we put in a push beam, which means it's flush with the floor joist. We cut all the joists back and hung them off our new beam.
Right.
And what we end up, and here's a picture of it here. Of course, these aren't going to be back to back, but I'll show you the improvement and then the leftover issue that had to be dealt with here. So here's our new LVL beam that's been installed. You can see the old existing floor joists that are hung off of that. So we have raised the head clearance there, but now if you look at that existing plenum, it sits quite low, right?
Yes.
So we had increased the head clearance for our taller than average client, but we still had this challenge with the ducting. And this is just a good example of, you know, that's the limitations of buying the standard duct setup that was available at the time. And so now we get into custom, I call it tin bashing, but what are your thoughts on that? Like, I know I'll show the picture. I'll go looking for the picture about how we solved the problem here, Kevin, but maybe you can elaborate on
totally.
some of the
So,
options there.
I remember that project very well. And I think one of the great things to really loving your home and really being invested in your home is, I feel it's important when you're doing a basement development or anything like that to really think about those things and do those things that are making a big difference in your life. And certainly that duct being a lot lower than that beam, basically we're making it much, much wider and shallower. So we need to take the same amount of air from point A to point B, but we want to do it in a much shallower way than there was. So, all of these things are possible. It's like a little jigsaw puzzle a lot of the time to do what we want to do, but there's typically a way of doing it. And the more you can anticipate overall, the better. And I like that duct system in that picture that you've got there, because it's still running underneath some of those joists there, but it tucked up a lot further. And, my experience in basement developments is, I'm guessing one of the things that you come across, Paul, is people are saying, I don't want to drop it. I don't want to bulkhead it. I don't want to drop it down. And a great picture of that is, I find a lot of times once people are living there and it's all done, those bulkheads just kind of disappear once it's all done.
This is that same house, and this is the after photo. Well, after drywall, I guess.
Right.
But so there's still a bulkhead there because we needed to still have duct runs over to that wing of the home. But we managed to shave 5 inches of head clearance out of this for them. And, for this basement had, I think, a ceiling height of, I think it was just shy. I think it was 7'10".
Right.
And our client, I believe, was 6'5". Right. So as you lost initially, I think it had a 12 or 13 inch bulkhead to walk under. And now we have it tightened up. I think we have it down to 8 inches or so. And, so that's one of those things you can be creative about with, looking at your ducting and what can you do to increase, clearance and often, and I'll show you another picture here in a second, you see, and we see this often too, when we do a lot of basement developments. So we'll come in after the builder has finished, and builders generally don't develop the basements for clients. The client will buy their new build and then they'll later on finish off their basement.
Right.
Give me a second here. I got to find this one. And we did this one together too.
Well, while you're looking for that, one of the really important things when people are doing their basements is, I've been into fabulous, really extravagant basement developments where they haven't added any ducts and they haven't added any cold air returns down low by the baseboard. So, when they're building a house, they do put vents in the basement, but they only put them down there to circulate the air. It has nothing to do with anybody living down there. It has nothing to do with anything that's going on in the future. And typically you'll want to modify those, close the return air off when you're doing that basement development. And oftentimes it's totally overlooked. Contractor comes in, oh, there's heat runs there. Oh, there's a return air there up on top. They do nothing about it. And all of a sudden they've got this $300,000 basement development with totally inadequate heat. And there's no return airs in the bedrooms they develop downstairs and whatnot. Impossible to do after the fact.
Absolutely. And we see that all the time. And it's one of the things that we work hard to make sure we incorporate that into the new layout. And they'll often, we see it all the time too. And it's really difficult because we get asked to give an estimate on a basement development.
Right.
And there are many different ways to develop a basement. And there certainly is the cheapest possible way. And then there's an adherence to best practice, which is how we tend to operate. And there's two very different ways to approach all of your HVAC in those two ends of the spectrum. Because within our development, we are always including to push the cold air returns down to floor level. We're adding heat runs everywhere. We have multiple cold air returns in the basement. And we tend to make sure, and for example, this photo I'm showing was a basement we developed for a client. This is how the builder left the basement. So look at the duct runs there and how they just angle across what's supposed to be the one bedroom in this basement. So you can see, based on how they've laid that out, how we're going to need to drop the entire ceiling in that bedroom. Right. And that was, for them, the path of least resistance.
Sure.
You'll run a straight shot across at a diagonal, and there you go. It reduces their labor cost to install it. Their material cost is lower. But to what cost for the end user when it comes to developing the space? So in the end, we reconfigured all this ducting to allow for a perimeter bulkhead and to have a nice high ceiling in the center of this bedroom, as one would hope they have in their basement bedroom, right? So when it comes to developments in general, just be careful when you're getting prices to find out what's included, because if your basement estimate looks nice and low, well, someone like my price comes in a bit on the higher end and you don't understand why, you need to read that scope document to understand what's included, because all of these rough-in changes aren't free, but it has a major impact upon how your space will feel, function, and how it's going to look when you're spending time down there.
I really like how you put that in terms of there's several different ways of doing it, and then there's best practice. And taking that a bit further, you have to be really careful with your contractor. I know that your quotes are super detailed, and the more detailed you can make that with knowing what you're getting, then you can really compare. And, having one quote from an experienced builder like you that does it right, and then somebody else that comes in with the price that's lower, well, you better be making sure that quote that is lower that you're considering is very, very clear in scope and extremely detailed. And one person's best practice is not another person's best practice.
Right.
And I find a lot of folks, they think that, well, the city inspected it, and so it complies with all of the code. Well, there's the code, but then there's best practice, and those do not always go together.
Absolutely not. And, not buyer beware, but do your due diligence and research who you have looking at your project for you, and understand when you see that low option for the price, you should look at it very closely to understand what's included. And at the same time, when you see the higher end price, what's included there? If the scope is the same and the price is very different, then there must be difference in spec. Because maybe there's a guy putting in a $600 faucet in your kitchen, and there's a guy putting in a $75 laundry tap in your kitchen down there, right? So you have to make sure you look at scope, check your spec, and then also just kind of try to do your best to read between the lines, which can be difficult for homeowners who might not know a lot about the industry. And that's why we do this show, right? We're here to try and help you understand more about each step, what to look for, what to be aware of, and what you want to make sure is included within the work that your contractor is proposing that you complete, right? And it's not always about the price. Trust me, we see it all the time where, someone picks the lower end option for the price to develop their basement or whatever their project might be. And in the end, it ends up being more expensive in the long run because you have to fix it. Something fails. You aren't happy with the level and quality of the finishing. So those are things to be certainly aware of and to keep top of mind, right? So,
for sure. One of the things I really like and admire about contact, the way you guys communicate with your clients, Paul, is that Acclaimed is is you could contract with somebody that's less expensive than Acclaimed, but
Right.
we're the type of company that I classify us as a kind of a retail HVAC company that takes the time and encourages customers to ask questions. And the thing I really like about Contact is it's not only you there. So you're happy to have somebody like me and all of your contractors in there, and for your client to have open communication dialogue with those professionals that will be doing that work. And that's actually quite unique. That's not a really normal thing for a contractor to be, no problem. Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Let me get Keven in here. Let me get so forth in here and do that. And that way as well, a client can really know what that end result is and be more involved in it, dealing with that trade at the same time. So I really respect that about the way that you guys work.
Well, thanks, Keven. I think in the end for us, it just has proven to be the best best practice for us, right? It becomes a collaborative approach to how we deliver our projects, and that keeps the client engaged, and they feel like they're on the up and up about what's being done in their home, and they understand the process. And in the end, they then, fully understand what they're getting, right? And they feel like there's so many of those terrible stories about the contractor. Where is they haven't shown up in days. When are they going to be back? When are we going to be finished? And it's just one of those things, right? I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, but we've always found that communication is key, right? Keep the client engaged and in the loop, do so with the trades as well, and approach it like a team. And that way you get the best end result. And for us, then it keeps us tight on our timelines. We have very few warranty calls. And in the end, you get the best team effort where you have each specific trade providing their expertise, but in this collaborative manner where you're going to get an overall best end result. And like in that last picture I showed, you don't want the most effective or efficient duct placement for only the HVAC guy's consideration, because that then throws off everything for the drywaller, the lighting layout, all this stuff, and the general finish of the home, right? So anyhow.
Well, another thing that happens, I find, is that HVAC, certainly when we're putting furnaces, air conditioning in, there's a lot of companies out there, I'd say the majority, they're kind of new home or kind of renovation kind of guys, and they don't service it. So they don't have a service division. They literally will put it in, they don't register the warranty for things, and they don't service it. And so when you're working with somebody that has that better communication and a level of best practice that is really long-term best practice, now after the fact that they've had things renovated, they can reach out to the electrician who did the work. They can reach out to the HVAC guy and so forth that can properly service and answer those questions. Yeah.
And more so, they can reach out to the general contractor, right? Because for me, on our projects, everything falls under our umbrella. So at the end of the job, whenever that might be, the client has an issue at any point, they contact us. And then from there, we reach out to our sub-trades. In the event that it's very trade specific, then we might connect, for example, you with the homeowner directly to resolve the issue, right? But we're always there as the caretaker to make sure that, the people are servicing their product the way they should in the event of a deficiency or a warranty issue, right? So
yeah, totally. And a lot of these things are, furnaces and air conditioners, you're talking about 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, right? So once that build is done and those warranty issues and all of those different things are taken care of, you'd want those trades in there that have the warranty on the product, that registered the warranty on the product. So you have a 10-year warranty instead of a 5-year warranty is what happens if you don't register.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point. I had a question in here from Alyssa. She's asking for any suggestions for regulating the temp in a condo. My parents have a unit that heats and cools. There is one unit for the whole building with thermostats in each unit. Would a new thermostat help?
Great question. And a thermostat likely would not help. The fact that it is in a building like that has a main system. So almost always a main system will only be doing the common areas in that complex and not inside of the suite. So the thermostat is going to control things in some where there's just a heating and cooling component, both of those, but it would be much more uncommon. You have different technologies, heat pumps and fan coils and things like this that are not very common. And the thermostat itself won't deal with the issue. But taking a look at that and having somebody like me in or giving me a call and going into a little bit more detail on that, I could certainly provide some advice. And I love pictures. So pictures of HVAC equipment and whatnot, they really tell me a lot for me to have a lot of conversations with people that are relevant as a starting point. So feel free to reach out to me, and hopefully I can help with that.
Speaking of pictures, boom, there's the ductless split unit. So talking about condos for a minute, I think that might be something. Would this be suitable?
It might be suitable. Now, if there's a system in place there already that we would have to take a look at. So we're doing an installation, I think it's on Thursday. It's an old condo building downtown, and this thing has its unit inside, and it is a strange system where the building itself will send hot water through for heat. It sends cold water through for cool, and then there's a condenser in there. So there's so many different systems. If there's a thermostat in there already, and if they have cool and hot regulation, then we would probably be working within that context of whatever's there. This stuff here definitely is absolutely fabulous for cooling things. One thing to note, in the condo setting, I think that was brought up in the question. It's extremely important that any kind of mechanical work like this in a condominium is run through your condominium board.
Absolutely.
We have one client who made the decision, no, I'll do it. Okay, made him sign a little disclaimer there. Well, you had to rip the whole thing out. Mm-hmm. And so condominium buildings, you really want to do your diligence and make sure that they know and approve everything.
Absolutely. We're doing a renovation of a penthouse condo downtown right now, and it is by far the strangest setup I've ever seen. We do a lot of high-rise renovations, right, of residential units, and generally you'll find that there are some very strict bylaws in place. You typically have some sort of a panel or a body that works within the condo association to help manage the renovations, and not manage them, but approve them and make sure they're happy with the scope that's going to happen within your project. And generally, you cannot modify anything to do with the envelope. You can't change the appearance of the exterior of the unit in any way, whether that means the different types of glass in your windows to putting an air conditioner on your balcony, anything for that matter. The one we're in now is very lax and has basically no rules other than please try to hire good contractors. And it's a very strange setup, but I think for them, I would say they should have some better bylaws in place. I mean, we're going to go do it all the right way anyways, but boy, that's a risky situation within a high rise for sure. Anyways.
You know what, this one that we're putting this really, really unique system in and replacing this 30-year-old system, I think it's on Thursday. This fellow, our client, very nice to deal with, but he said, I'm really, really sorry. He's very apologetic, but the condo board, thanks for letting me know that I had to deal with them, but they want a WCB clearance letter and they want liability insurance from the contractor. And he really was not very, very happy to tell me that. And I said, that is fantastic. I said, it's fabulous. I said, just those two things, if a condo association would make sure that any contractor in the building had that. Because any contractor that says, oh, why do you need that? Or, geez, let me see if I can get that. You don't want to be dealing with them.
That's the wrong contractor, right? But that is.
But I mean, a lot of them don't, right? So just those two questions, provide those two things. That way your condo, your whole thing is pretty well protected. And there's a lot of contractors out there that have no idea what liability insurance is. And just, again, for our company to send that to a client takes about 5 minutes because we do it so much. If you're talking to a contractor who after, is making excuses, you don't want to choose another contractor.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you live in a high-rise condo, you can imagine if there was an issue, the level of liability that would put on your shoulders if your contractor didn't have insurance.
Huge.
So anyhow, we've got about 7 minutes left here. We kind of skipped over furnaces. Should we talk about them really quickly?
Sure.
What the difference is like between your atmospheric and your high efficiency and your mid efficiency. And I'll just share a picture of a furnace just to kind of key us into that conversation.
Perfect. You know what? Furnaces have become increasingly easy to kind of talk about. And the reason they've become easier to talk about is that, the Canadian government for 10 years has basically said, hey, look, you can't bring a furnace into Canada unless it's high efficiency gas. Okay. About a year and a half ago, the United States government said, okay, there's no more furnaces made for residential that don't have a high efficiency motor for the blower. And they came up with that because air conditioning is a far bigger concern for electricity consumption, and that fan of the furnace is what's pushing it. So all the furnaces of note are made in the United States. So the combination of the Canadian government saying high efficiency gas and the Americans saying high efficiency motor, you can only buy really an ultra high efficiency furnace now, period, end of story. That's all you can install. And now you've got the features between a high-end complicated modulating system for specific applications, a two-stage furnace, but all of them now, Paul, they have the same efficiency on the motor and on the gas. So there's a lot less variables involved. And I'm glad that you brought this picture up because you can see the plastic piping on top of the furnace. So any furnace that has plastic piping, whether it's white or black, it's been white for almost 2 decades, that you can consider a high efficiency furnace. It's definitely got high efficiency burning on the gas side. And then an atmospheric one, your older type that has your typical steel chimney on the top end. And, you can see on the right-hand side, we've got this picture where there's one of the covers on and off on that filter. It's a large filter on that system. It's almost unusual for Acclaimed to be installing a filter system now that is like less than 4.5 inches wide, because we want the air to go through. Plus, we want it to be efficient. Those are not expensive systems. And in that picture as well, you can see on top of the furnace, that is the air conditioning coil area that I was talking about earlier. In terms of that's the very important part of the air conditioning system that's inside there. You can't see it, and that is hooked up to the outside air conditioner condenser outside.
Right. Absolutely. One thing we talk about quickly too for furnaces, if you have an older furnace or your hot water heater, for example, your hot water tank, if they're atmospheric venting, it means you're going up through a chimney through your roof. And we often now, we're doing this actually together on our project here right away, is we are actually going to upgrade the furnace and the hot water heater so that we can get rid of that chimney and we can take that space back in the kitchen to allow for a pantry area. Right. So, because now you direct vent, you'll come typically through your rim joist and out the side of the house, and they vent out the side now as opposed to up and through your roof. So we're able to then demolish that old chimney and get that space back. And while it's only a couple square feet typically, sometimes it can be a real game changer within a layout of a smaller space, whether in this case it's a kitchen, and gives them some more storage. And out of the deal, now they get, they're upgrading their furnace at the same time, which is kind of a 2 birds with 1 stone, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. Most furnaces we replace, we have to put a new chimney in for the water tank. We have to put a smaller one in. And that's part of that equation, right? Is that when you're doing that, you're changing the water tank out or going to a tankless unit. Those ones are available to go out the side as well. And most people don't have the type of water tank in place when you're starting to do a renovation that you do that. And I'll bet you've had some clients over the years, Paul, that just can't believe that they can actually do a different layout because they thought it was there.
Especially in like smaller spaces like bathrooms sometimes, right? If you can get that sometimes 2 foot by 2 foot chimney out of the space, out of the room, and you can have that back for your bathroom. Holy smokes. It's definitely a game changer for that little layout for the space, right? So
that's for sure.
Well, let's pull this up here. So we're getting close to the end of the show here, a couple minutes left. Thanks so much, Keven, for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. And I hope for anybody who's watched, you've learned a bit about your HVAC considerations. And if you have specific questions, you need a furnace, you aren't too sure what you need within your home, it doesn't feel like it's operating properly, it's cold, it's hot, you should call Keven and the team at Acclaimed. And here's their contact information here on the screen. If your project is larger scope, you want to redevelop your basement, you're adding an addition, and you need some help with planning the layout and design of your space and then how that's going to tie into your HVAC, then that's great to reach out to someone like me who can help with that planning, and we'll pull in the right people then to make sure that we have the experts from each trade weigh in on the design to make sure it's going to perform the way that it should. So thanks again, Keven. Always a pleasure. And we'll be sharing this back into the rest of our social media feeds here. So you can use it as a link to share with your friends. If you know they have a project coming up, you can spread the word. And like I said, reach out to Keven directly if you have HVAC questions, and we'll go from there.
Well, Paul, it was great to spend the time with you. And I'm hoping that, if any of your viewers here do have those strange questions, I'm happy to get on the phone with them and look at some pictures and help people any way that I can. It was a real pleasure, as always, talking to you today.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Keven. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Stay happy and healthy and warm and cool, everybody.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right, y'all. Well, thanks so much for watching. This has been the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster from Contract Renovation to Custom Homes. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new show, new topic. Please do like our page, subscribe, leave some comments and questions. We'll certainly respond and get back to you. Thanks again. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.